The night was still. The moon hung over the Venetian lagoon like a pale eye watching from the heavens. A small fishing boat drifted quietly across the black water, its engine dead, the only sound being the lapping of waves against its wooden sides. Inside the boat sat two men, locals from Venice, their flashlights trembling as they pointed toward a patch of mist rising from the horizon. That mist wasn't fog. It was smoke. "Do you see that?" Marco whispered. His voice was tight with fear. His friend Antonio nodded. That's Poveglia. The name alone sent a shiver through Marco's spine. Everyone in Venice knew about Poveglia Island, the cursed place where no one dared go after sunset. As their boat drew closer, the faint outline of an abandoned bell tower appeared, standing like a broken finger stabbing into the fog. The smoke came from somewhere near its base. Antonio raised his flashlight and froze. In the pale beam, a figure appeared, human-like but twisted. The man, or what looked like one, was moving through the ruins, dragging something heavy behind him. "Someone's there," Marco hissed. But then the thing stopped. Its head turned. The beam of the flashlight caught hollow, black sockets where eyes should have been. The men screamed and dropped the light. When it hit the deck, the beam flickered on Marco's hands, and they both saw the scratches carved in the wood of the boat. Words, freshly cut. It said, "Leave U.S. here." By morning, the boat was found adrift by the Venetian Coast Guard. Empty. No Marco. No Antonio. Just a charred flashlight and an old Venetian doctor's mask lying at the bottom of the boat. That same day, April 21st, 2014, the Italian government once again closed off all access to Poveglia Island. But the story doesn't end there, because that was not the first time people vanished on that cursed island. Outro, the echo that never ends. The Hotel del Salto still stands on the cliff's edge, watching the centuries go by. Its walls hold laughter, grief, whispers, and prayers. Tourists see beauty. Locals see ghosts. But everyone feels it. The pull. Maybe it's gravity. Maybe it's memory. Or maybe it's something deeper calling from the mist. If you ever visit Colombia and stand before Tequendama Falls, listen closely. You might hear the roar of water or the faint murmur of voices carried on the wind. And if you peer through the fog toward those tall arched windows, you may see someone standing there, just for a moment, before vanishing into the white. Was it Montenegro? Isabel Duval? Elena Reyes? Or someone new who couldn't resist the call of the leap? One thing's for sure, the Hotel del Salto doesn't forget its guests. It simply waits for the next one to check in. Poveglia Island sits quietly between Venice and Lido, just 17 acres of decaying land surrounded by calm blue waters. But if you ask anyone from Venice, they'll tell you, those waters hide centuries of horror. Its story begins long before the Italian government declared it off limits. In fact, the first records of Poveglia date back to 421 AD, when a group of Venetians fled to the island to escape barbarian invaders. For a while, it was peaceful, a small, thriving fishing community. But in 1348, peace ended. The Black Death, the bubonic plague, swept through Venice like wildfire, killing thousands every day. The government needed somewhere to dispose of infected bodies, somewhere isolated. They chose Poveglia. Soon, barges loaded with corpses began sailing toward the island. The dead were tossed into massive pits and burned. When the pits filled, new ones were dug. Some say that the ash from those fires turned the island's soil black. Others claim that the screams of the dying could be heard echoing across the lagoon. According to historical records from the Venetian archives, more than 160,000 bodies were dumped or burned on Poveglia during the plague years. Some were buried alive by mistake. Victims mistaken for dead when they were still breathing weakly under layers of corpses. Over time, the island became known as Isole dei Morti, the Island of the Dead. Even after the plague ended, Venetians refused to go near it. Fishermen steered clear, saying their nets came up filled with bones. Centuries later, in 1777, the island was taken over by the Venetian Public Health Office, turning it into a quarantine station. Ships arriving from foreign lands were forced to dock there. Their passengers held for weeks to ensure they weren't carrying disease. Those who got sick were never seen again. Locals told stories of ghostly figures walking the docks at night, of the bell in the old tower ringing by itself when no one was there. Then came 1922, the year Poveglia's darkest chapter began. The Italian government converted the remaining buildings into a mental asylum. It was said to be a place of healing, but those who went there described it as something else entirely. The patients whispered that they could hear cries under the floors. They said the doctors didn't treat them. They experimented on them. One doctor in particular stood out, a man known only as Dr. Girolamo, though his full name was rumored to be Dr. Girolamo Marcello. He believed he could cure mental illness through lobotomy, but his methods were far from humane. Witnesses later described how he dragged patients to the bell tower, where he performed surgeries without anesthesia. The cries were said to echo for miles across the water. It said that one night, the doctor himself went mad. He climbed the bell tower, screaming that he could see the faces of the plague victims staring at him. Then he leapt to his death. But even that didn't end the horror. Fishermen claimed they saw his body hanging halfway down the tower for days before it vanished. And ever since then, the bell, the same one that was removed years ago, sometimes rings by itself in the dead of night. Modern-day historians call it folklore. But the locals, they don't go near that island, not even for money. In 2014, when the government briefly auctioned Poveglia to private buyers, an Italian businessman named Luigi Brugnero, later mayor of Venice, bid to purchase it. He planned to restore it into a hotel. But after just one visit to the island, the project was quietly abandoned. No one knows what happened during that visit, but a diver who accompanied the inspection team later told La Repubblica newspaper that they found rooms full of ashes and strange writing on the walls. And in one of the medical wings, they found something worse, a surgical table, still bolted to the floor. The diver said he never returned. As of today, the Italian government lists Poveglia as off-limits. But that hasn't stopped thrill-seekers from sneaking in. Some leave with strange burns, some with whispers in their ears that follow them for weeks, and some don't leave at all. Because as one Venetian old-timer told a BBC reporter in 2016, the dead never left Poveglia. They are waiting for company. And he might be right, because what happened to Marco and Antonio in 2014 wasn't the last time someone disappeared there. 2 years after the mysterious disappearance of Marco and Antonio, Venice was once again buzzing with whispers about Poveglia. But this time it wasn't two fishermen. It was a team of ghost hunters. In July 2016, a small group calling themselves Venetian Shadows announced they would be spending one night on Poveglia to prove once and for all whether the island was haunted or just a legend. The team consisted of 4 people. Elena Rossi, the group's leader, a local journalist known for her investigative documentaries. Luca Cani, a tech specialist who handled cameras and sound equipment. Marta De Luca, a psychic medium who claimed she could communicate with trapped spirits. And Johnny Falco, a paramedic who joined for safety reasons, though he didn't believe in ghosts. They brought drones, thermal cameras, and a small motorboat. The Italian government had forbidden entry, but that didn't stop them. They went after midnight when the fog was thickest. At 12:43 a.m., their boat engine died as they neared the island. Luca recorded on his handheld camera. "We didn't even touch land yet, and the equipment's already failing. That's a good start." He laughed nervously, but in the video, you can hear something faint, a low hum, almost like chanting somewhere across the water. They arrived at the dock, their flashlights slicing through the mist. The buildings were in ruins, broken archways, overgrown ivy, and shattered windows reflecting the moonlight. Elena whispered to the camera, "We're standing on what's said to be one of the most cursed places on earth. More than 100,000 people died here. Some say their souls never left." They began exploring the old quarantine building. Dust floated in the air like ash. In one corner, they found what looked like hospital beds, rusted, tangled, and melted into the floor. Johnny muttered that it felt like a graveyard disguised as a hospital. Then, around 1:30 a.m., their temperature sensors dropped, suddenly and sharply, from 21 degrees Celsius to 11 degrees Celsius in less than 5 seconds. Luca's footage caught everyone's reaction. Marta gasped. Her breath came out in white mist. "They're here," she said. Johnny rolled his eyes. "It's just humidity." But on the recording, there's a strange echo after her words, like someone whispering leave right next to the microphone. Minutes later, they entered the main asylum building. The floorboards creaked under every step. There, near a collapsed wall, Elena found a half-burned medical record with the name Girolamo Marcello, the same doctor rumored to have performed lobotomies in the bell tower. As they set up a thermal camera facing the corridor, Marta began to act strangely. She stopped walking and said she could feel someone following them. Her voice was shaking. "He's here, watching us." Then, the camera picked up a faint silhouette at the far end of the hallway. Cold blue against a field of orange heat, human-shaped, still, watching. Elena thought it was just their shadow, but when they turned around, nothing was there. By 2 a.m., they reached the bell tower. The stone steps spiraled upward, slick with moss. The group sound recorder picked up faint metallic clanging, like a rope being pulled. Luca's voice trembled in the footage. "Is that the bell?" It was. 3 long, slow tolls echoed through the island, even though, according to local archives, the bell was removed in 1943. They didn't stay long after that. Elena ordered everyone to head back to the boat. But as they crossed the courtyard, the camera jolted. A loud crash rang out behind them. A wooden door had slammed shut on its own. The video goes chaotic after that. Shaky camera angles, heavy breathing, screaming. You hear Elena shouting run, and Luca saying, "The exit's gone." Then the recording ends. 2 weeks later, a fisherman found a GoPro camera floating near the Venetian shoreline. It was waterlogged but intact. The footage, later verified by police, contained only fragments of that night. About 18 minutes of shaky video showing glimpses of the asylum, flashes of the bell tower, and the faces of the team in panic. Of the 4 members, only one body was ever found, Johnny Falco, the paramedic. His corpse washed ashore near Lido 3 days later. The autopsy ruled it an accidental drowning, but divers who helped recover him noticed something strange. His wrists were bound with rusted chain, and in the lining of his jacket pocket, police found a small scrap of fabric with faded red letters that spelled Poveglia. The other 3 members, Elena, Marta, and Luca, were never found. After the footage leaked online, local authorities cracked down even harder. Anyone caught near the island would be fined or arrested. Still, people tried to go. Curiosity is stronger than fear. But here's where the story gets even more disturbing. In 2018, Venice's maritime surveillance recorded something unusual, a faint, flickering light coming from Poveglia around midnight, visible for only a few seconds. When patrol boats approached, the light vanished. That same week, residents of Malamaco, a small nearby village, reported hearing church bells echoing across the lagoon, even though the nearest bell tower was miles away. No one could explain it. But then, in March 2019, a drone operator filming a travel video over the Venetian lagoon accidentally captured something strange. In the drone's footage, at the exact coordinates of Poveglia, you can see a flicker of movement near the bell tower, like someone waving. When the operator zoomed in, frame by frame, the figure appeared to be wearing a white doctor's coat. The video went viral on Italian social media before mysteriously disappearing. To this day, no one knows who or what it was. Some say it was a trick of light. Others say Dr. Girolamo still walks at tower, protecting what's buried beneath it. Because if you believe the locals, the island isn't just haunted, it's cursed. And every time someone steps foot there, it takes something back. Long before the plague ships arrived, before the asylum, before the doctor who lost his mind in the bell tower, Poveglia was already marked. The Venetian archives tell a story few have ever read. It's hidden in the Archivio di Stato di Venezia under a section labeled Restricted 5A131, Rituali e Maleficia. Inside are faded documents from the 6th and 7th centuries, describing a strange occurrence during Venice's founding years. According to the records, the early settlers of Venice believed certain islands in the lagoon were sacred, places where the sea whispered secrets of the underworld. Poveglia, they wrote, was one of them. But something happened that changed it forever. One document, a priest's letter dated August 12th, 421 AD, describes a small church being built on the island. The priest, Father Benedict, wrote, "The ground here is restless. The soil shifts, and the air grows cold after prayer. We buried 3 sinners here, but the earth rejected them. It spat them out overnight." That was the first recorded burial on Poveglia. The next morning, the graves had collapsed, and the bodies lay uncovered, their faces blackened. The villagers fled. From then on, it was considered unhallowed ground. By the 12th century, the island was used as a military outpost. Venice was thriving, its fleets ruling the seas. But soldiers stationed on Poveglia reported strange illnesses. Men would wake screaming in the night, claiming to hear the cries of those buried beneath their tents. Within a month, most of the garrison was dead, their skin blistered with black sores. The church declared the island touched by plague, centuries before the actual plague came. Some historians now believe Poveglia soil itself is toxic. But locals insist it's something worse, that the land remembers every death, every scream, every fear. When the Black Death arrived in 1348, Venice had no choice but to use the island again. Mass pyres were built, and bodies were ferried by the thousands. But here's the thing. Historical accounts show that not all of them were dead. Venetian medic records describe final inspection checks before disposal. Victims of plague often fell into comas, appearing lifeless. Those who later awoke found themselves among burning corpses. One account from 1349 reads, "A man named Matteo cried for his mother as the fire consumed him. His screams were heard until bells of San Marco." Generations passed, but the island's legend grew darker. Venetian folklore spoke of I Bruciati, the burned ones, who still wander at night, searching for air they never got to breathe. But there's one story buried deep within the archives that stands apart from all others. It's known as Il Giuramento del Medico, the doctor's oath, a document dated June 3rd, 1782, signed by the Venetian Public Health Office, described an outbreak on a trade vessel quarantine near Poveglia. A doctor named Girolamo Marcello volunteered to oversee containment. The same name would later reappear in the 1920s asylum records, the doctor rumored to have gone mad. The question historians have never answered is, how? How could one man, supposedly born in 1890, have a name that appeared on medical records more than a century earlier? Some claim it was simply a family line of physicians, but locals say differently. They say the first Girolamo performed forbidden rituals on Poveglia to seal the disease into the land. In exchange for saving Venice, he made a pact, one that cursed his bloodline. The ritual is described briefly in a 1792 ecclesiastical report. He burned incense of sulfur and salt over the dead, then read from a black book not of our faith. The next morning, his hair had turned white, and the fires on the island burned for 3 days without fuel. The report ends abruptly. When the island was later reopened as a quarantine station in 1777, the same family name resurfaced among its staff. Each descendant who worked there met a violent or unexplained death. By the time the asylum opened in 1922, the last of them, Dr. Girolamo Marcello II, took the post of chief surgeon. He reportedly moved into the same house built by his ancestor. And according to rumors among the asylum staff, he became obsessed with the island's soil, testing samples, collecting ash, and even injecting patients with it, claiming it could cure fear. None survived. In 1930, the asylum was abruptly shut down. Officially, it was due to structural damage. But internal memos, discovered decades later, suggest otherwise. A report dated October 9th, 1930, from the Venetian Carabinieri states, patients have begun digging beneath the bell tower. They claim voices tell them where to dig. We found bones, not plague victims, but of animals arranged in circles. The doctor insists it's part of therapy. 2 weeks later, the doctor jumped from the tower. Witnesses say he survived the fall but was dragged, screaming, into the mist by what looked like human shapes rising from the ground. The next day, the island was empty. Every patient, every nurse, gone. No one knows how or why. When authorities returned weeks later, they found only surgical tools, ash, and the smell of burned flesh that never seemed to fade. To this day, Venetian fishermen say the air around Poveglia still carries that scent. But here's the thing. In 2020, Italian researchers quietly returned to the island for environmental testing. Their goal was to measure pollution levels from the old quarantine pits. What they found shocked them. Beneath the top layer of soil, they discovered human ash mixed with strange mineral compounds, sulfur, lead, and something unidentifiable. When tested in lab conditions, the samples emitted small electromagnetic pulses, enough to interfere with nearby electronics. The official report never reached the public, but a leaked file published briefly online included one chilling note from a scientist named Dr. Riccardo Esposito. The ground reacts to movement. It's as if the island is alive. And that brings us to today, where new satellite images show sections of the island shifting slightly every few months, as if parts of it are sinking or something beneath is pushing up. Some say it's erosion. Others say the curse is still breathing. Because whatever happened on Poveglia didn't end in the 14th century, or the 1920s, or even 2016. It's waiting for the next soul to step onto its shores. By early 2020, the world was gripped by the COVID-19 pandemic. Cities empty, borders closed, and for the first time in centuries, Venice fell silent. Its canals, once filled with tourists and gondoliers, became eerily still. That silence was what made it the perfect time for a secret expedition. A research team from the University of Padua, working under Italy's Ministry of Cultural Heritage, was granted temporary access to Poveglia. Officially, they were there to collect soil and air samples, to test how centuries of decay had affected the environment. Unofficially, several of them wanted to answer a darker question. Was the island truly cursed, or was there a scientific explanation for everything that had happened? The team consisted of 5 people. Dr. Riccardo Esposito, lead geologist. Professor Elena Marchesi, historian specializing in Venetian folklore. Dr. Matteo Ferri, acoustics and sound engineer. Lucia DeSantis, biologist and lab technician. And Marco Bianchi, a young filmmaker documenting the mission for archival purposes. They arrived on June 16th. 2020, docking their small boat on the same weathered pier where the 2016 ghost hunters had last been seen alive. Marco's footage, later recovered from his camera card, starts with the sound of water and seagulls before cutting to a shaky shot of the team unloading equipment. The atmosphere was calm but tense, the kind of silence that feels heavy. As they stepped onto the island, Lucia whispered, "It smells like metal." Dr. Esposito nodded. "Sulfur and iron. The soil's rich with it." But Professor Marchesi wasn't convinced. "That's not iron," she said quietly. "That's blood ash." Her words hung in the air like fog. They set up camp inside the old administrative building. Its roof half collapsed, vines crawling through shattered windows. They powered up portable lights and unpacked motion sensors, thermal cameras, and ground-penetrating radar. The plan was simple. Collect soil samples near the plague pits. Record seismic activity beneath the island. Compare sound readings to nearby lagoon currents. But almost immediately, things went wrong. At 11:45 a.m., while drilling a test borehole near the bell tower, their equipment malfunctioned. The drill hit something metallic beneath the soil. Not stone, not bone, but a solid ring-like structure. Dr. Esposito recorded in his logbook. Metallic contact at 2.3 meters deep. No record of construction beneath this zone. Composition unknown. Emits low vibration when touched. They lowered a small camera probe into the hole. The feed showed what looked like a rusted metal surface, covered in strange markings. Circular, repetitive, almost like a seal. Professor Marchesi froze when she saw it. That symbol, it's the same sigil used in 18th century containment rituals. Matteo, the sound engineer, placed a geophone next to the borehole to record underground vibrations. What it captured made everyone step back. It wasn't a hum of machinery or water currents. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Lucia whispered, "That's impossible." The team decided to leave the probe in place and monitor it overnight. By 8 p.m., as the sun dipped behind the Venetian skyline, They sat outside their camp eating in silence. The air was still, except for the occasional call of seabirds. Then at 9:13 p.m., their motion sensor, placed near the southern ruins, triggered. Marco's camera turned toward the monitor, a faint figure, heat signature barely visible, moving slowly across the courtyard. At first, they thought it was a bird, but when Dr. Esposito adjusted the range, the shape stood upright, human-sized, cold blue on the thermal feed, colder than the air around it. Could it be a person? Marco asked. "There's no one else here," Esposito replied. The figure disappeared seconds later, leaving behind a static interference that distorted their radios. Then came the sound. The geophone near the borehole began picking up deep, rolling noises, not like footsteps, but pressure as if the ground was shifting below them. Mateo's instruments spiked. He muttered, "Something's moving under us." They watched as the readings rose and fell in slow, deliberate patterns. Every 10 seconds, thump, 10 seconds, thump, like something breathing. By 10:30 p.m., they retreated indoors. Marco continued filming, his flashlight beam shaking as he followed Dr. Esposito. In the video, you can hear him whisper, "Do you hear that?" A low hum echoed through the building, faint like distant chanting. Professor Marchesi's voice trembles. "That's Latin, the same words used in the doctor's oath." Lucia wanted to leave immediately, but Esposito insisted they stay until morning. "We need evidence," he said. "If this is geological activity, we'll prove it once and for all." The camera cuts to the next morning. Marco's lens pans across the camp. Overturned chairs, missing equipment, a trail of disturbed dirt leading toward the bell tower. No one's in sight. The last footage shows Marco running up the tower stairs, breathing hard, calling out, "Lucia, Ricardo." His flashlight shakes violently. Then the sound returns, that low heartbeat. As he reaches the top of the tower, the camera spins toward the window. For a brief moment, the view catches a lagoon shimmering under sunlight. Then, just before the feed cuts to static, something moves in front of the lens. It's a face, not solid, translucent pale, eyes black as oil. It's smiling. Then the recording ends. Weeks later, on July 2nd, 2020, a fisherman discovered an abandoned boat drifting near Lido, its fuel tanks full, its equipment missing. Inside was a single notebook sealed in plastic, Dr. Esposito's field journal. The last entry read, 11:47 p.m., the soil opened. The air pulsed. We heard voices. The ground is not dead. The island remembers. After that, the Italian Ministry of Heritage denied the team had ever been authorized for such an expedition. The footage, reportedly stored at a private lab in Padua, was seized by authorities. It never resurfaced. But local rumor says a researcher who viewed the tapes was later hospitalized, claiming he could still hear the island breathing through the walls of his house. And since that summer, fishermen have reported something new. The water around Poveglia is warmer than anywhere else in the lagoon, as if something beneath the island is alive. In August 2023, the Italian Coast Guard received an unusual distress signal. It was faint, low frequency, and impossible to trace. The call lasted exactly 47 seconds, repeating a phrase in Italian over and over. Siamo ancora che aiutatisi. Translation, we are still here, help us. At first, they assumed it came from a sinking vessel near the Venetian lagoon. But when the technicians triangulated the signal, it didn't lead to open water. It led to a set of coordinates, a dead center point between Venice and Lido, Poveglia Island. The operator on duty that night, Lieutenant Andrea Valli, wrote in his incident report, the voice was distorted, not electronic. It sounded human, but there was something underneath, an echo like multiple voices speaking in unison. When the Coast Guard dispatched a patrol, they found nothing but mist and silence. The island loomed in the distance like a ghost. No lights, no movement, just the sound of waves slapping the pier. That same week, a local fisherman named Carlo Biaggi, one of the few who still worked near Poveglia, reported hearing a bell toll across the lagoon 3 times, just like in the lost 2016 footage. The next day, his boat was discovered floating unmanned, its deck covered in black soot. The Coast Guard retrieved the onboard radio recorder. When they played it back, a deep, hollow sound filled the room, the unmistakable clang of a bell followed by a whisper. Not the doctor, the island. After that, authorities locked the file. But Italy being Italy, and Venice being a city of rumor, the story spread fast. Amateur paranormal groups, internet theorists, even local priests began visiting the lagoon's edges, trying to pick up the voice themselves. One of them succeeded. A young radio hobbyist named Giulia Moretti, living in Chioggia, recorded a signal on October 9th, 2023, around midnight. Her shortwave radio picked up a brief broadcast. 2 words whispered through static. Tutti restano. Everyone stays. She posted the clip online. Within hours, it went viral, gaining millions of views. But what terrified people most wasn't the words. It was what they saw when slowing down the video. In the reflection of her window, just behind Giulia, a faint shadow moved. She was home alone. 2 days later, Giulia deleted her account. Her friends say she left town, claiming they were calling her name in her sleep. Meanwhile, back in Venice, unexplained electrical interference began affecting coastal monitoring systems. Cameras facing the lagoon flickered at night, showing brief bursts of static, and sometimes for a split second, faces. Not clear faces, but blurred, burned shapes like silhouettes trapped behind smoke. A local priest, Father Domenico Alberti, wrote a short essay for the Venetian newspaper Il Gazzettino in late 2023. He said, Poveglia is not a place of haunting. It is a wound that never healed. Every soul cast into its soil cries not for revenge, but for release. But some say that release may never come, because according to satellite records, strange electromagnetic activity continues to pulse around Poveglia roughly every 47 days, the same duration between the Coast Guard distress call and each subsequent anomaly. The next pulse is due soon. And just last month, a maintenance worker at the Venetian Coastline Authority reported something that sent chills to the whole department. While checking signal buoys off the Southern Canal, his receiver suddenly burst into static. Through the distortion, a voice whispered, clear, calm, and chilling, "We remember you, Riccardo." Dr. Riccardo Esposito, the missing geologist from the 2020 expedition. No one spoken his name on radio frequencies. No record of it existed in Coast Guard transmissions. Yet somehow the island knew. It remembered. For centuries, Venice has been called La Serenissima, the serene city. But just beyond its glittering canals lies a secret the city refuses to face. An island that was never meant for the living. Poveglia isn't just a place of death. It's a timeline of human pain, war, plague, madness, and fear, all condensed into one small patch of earth that never stopped absorbing it. Every scream, every sorrow, every broken promise, it's all still there, buried just inches beneath the soil. The fishermen who vanished in 2014. The ghost hunters who never came back in 2016. The scientists who tried to wake what should have stayed asleep in 2020. The voice crying for help in 2023. Each one left a mark. Each one was swallowed by the same silence. Locals still say that when a lagoon fog rolls in just right, when the air turns heavy and the bells of San Marco fall quiet, you can hear faint whispers drifting across the water. They don't ask for help anymore. They're warning us to stay away. Because Poveglia isn't haunted. It's alive. And the dead, they never left.